Hello, and thank you for joining me for another episode of the Finish More Music podcast. So I am delighted to be joined by Amber, Sophia, and Sean Crowther, who produce and DJ together and have got a really exciting project, actually, that we're going to dive into that's sort of joined to that as Kakura. And they're also partners in life as well as partners in music. So you never know, we might get our first ever FMM podcast domestic. Who knows? I'm kidding, of course. But there were so many interesting things to talk about with relationships and creatives and all of those things. So I'm excited to dive in. First and foremost, guys, thank you so much for joining me on the show and welcome.
Thanks very much for having us, Keith. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, 100%. Really looking forward to it.
Awesome stuff. So let's dive in right at the top, which is your relationship in music, how you work together, what the project is that you guys are building and have been on this journey, sort of what each of you individually bring to it and how you work together as a relationship in music. If you can sort of run us through that, because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, so I think it probably helps to give a bit of background. So I predominantly come from the music background, although to be honest, that was a relatively recent thing that I moved into. Prior to that, I was actually working in finance, which seems to be a common thing for most people, finance into music, follow the dream. And so I've been predominantly making the music, but both of us have a shared love for electronic music, and that's been a big thing in our relationship since since the get-go, since we came together. In fact, our first weekend of actually being together and knowing each other was at Parklife, the big festival in Manchester. Awesome. From then, we ended up going to Ibiza the same summer, and bearing in mind this is like weeks into knowing each other, went to Ibiza once or twice and together, and had such a fantastic time. As sort of time went on, music just became such a massive part of our lives. And then at one point I sort of thought, you know what, I'd really like to actually start making music and getting into it. And so over a period of probably 3 or 4 years or something like that, I started to get into it, started to obviously joined FMM and stuff like this. And then probably 2 or 3 years ago, so about 3 or 4 years into our actual journey, we had to be honest with you, we had out of necessity to assess where we were at with things in our relationship, because things were getting work-wise very difficult. Time was being spent too much on work and not enough on each other, on focusing on our relationship and each other and stuff like that. And after a long period of time and a big conversation, we decided actually what we wanted to do was work together. So we decided to basically join forces. I brought in the music aspect and Amber brought in the documentary making aspect. So do you want to explain what you've been doing in terms of the documentaries and how this is going to how this works with us?
Yeah. So I have always sort of been very interested in journalism, and then kind of veered a little bit more towards documentary making. But this kind of crossroads point Sean was discussing, where we thought, do you know what, we should really just do this together, was we were living in London, doing that whole thing, just living in that rat race kind of thing. And like you said, sort of going a bit far away from each other in terms of the quality relationship time. And I think a big realization was that I was listening to the music that Sean was making, and a big thing for him in why we, to be honest, both love music is the idea of telling a story through music. And, I was listening to the productions, and he was always quite keen to get across that kind of curious, playful, atmosphere and journey, and actually creating characters within the music. And that's exactly what I like doing when I make stories and I'm doing documentaries. It is all about the story, and it's a very kind of primal thing, I think, in human beings. We love stories, it's part of how we've evolved. And we used to sit around the campfire and tell stories. It's kind of a very big part of human nature. So I think we saw an opportunity really to be able to combine what I do, which is kind of exploring the human condition, I suppose, and music, because DJs, for example, get an incredible opportunity to travel the world. They have such big platforms, but they never really share with their audiences much about the places they are. And, you know, so much of the kind of developing world in South America and parts of Asia and stuff, where the scenes are like really developing there, you know, there's such a wealth of stories to be told there. So I think we just, yeah, saw a real, not necessarily just a gap in the market, but just a way that we could really combine our forces, and it just seems to be working really well.
It's very unique, actually, that this whole concept of, you know, the creativity in music, creativity in journalism, and finding the parallels in the stories. I think that's a really unique thing, and I've spoken to you before about it before, but it's such a unique concept to marry them together, and your love of traveling and all of these different things. So you mentioned it was sort of a few years back that you combined work. Sean, I know you obviously just mentioned you were in finance. How did the decision come about to quit that? Because similar to you guys, you know, Anna and I, we were living in London, we were doing the rat race thing, and there was a decision for me to step away from a very lucrative job in the city and to pursue creativity. And it's a pretty big moment. There's a lot to weigh up there. It can be a bit scary. How did you guys approach that together?
Yeah, it was exactly the same with me. You know, finance pays pretty well, to be honest, and so leaving a job like that is really difficult, because, you know, you're set for life at the end of the day, and particularly we were living in London at that time, and our lifestyle was, you know, potentially absolutely brilliant, living in one of the best cities in the world with enough money to be able to do what we wanted and travel the world and all this sort of stuff. And so I think really what pushed me over the edge was the thought that whilst we do have all this, you know, not all this money, I'm not going to be like we were millionaires or anything like that, do you know what I mean? But, you know, splashing the cash. But
we could live in London.
We could live in London. Yeah. We could live in London. And what really sort of, there's two things that happened. I saw that Amber, because she was doing an internship, and I believe it was at Sky at the time, and she was sending me some things that she was doing. I think she was covering Wimbledon and a few other things and stuff like this. And I was thinking, wow, she sounds like she's really loving her day to day. And I was sat there in the office at the time, and I was thinking, I'm not really enjoying my day to day. So despite the fact that we're traveling around the world and we're doing this and that and the other, I was thinking, I can't just live for the weekend. I can't just live for this next holiday. I need to do something day to day, which really I absolutely love. And obviously I was doing music at the time, and I loved it. And so it was almost like there's not a second life that as far as we know. And so you're going to have to do it now in this life. And then it was like, okay, how do I basically take the plunge? And a couple of factors sort of happened. To be honest, like, we were going through a bit of a strange period in our relationship and ended up moving back to the north of England, away from the south. And so that felt like a catalyst as we moved back to the north, somewhere a bit cheaper, to be able to jump ship into something, you know, that was cost effective. So that was one aspect, was basically, you know, moving back to somewhere where we could do it. I think the other factors are, as I said, if I'm not going to do it now, when am I ever going to do it? And I guess some of this was also what you teach, Keith, which is backing yourself to go all in, that you will find a way, like that doesn't have to be a plan B, that you will be able to stabilize yourself. And I'm not saying that necessarily works for everybody. There is a lot of uncertainty, but I think given where we were at, you know, in terms of, we didn't have like any ties or anything, it seemed to be a good time to be able to do it.
It is interesting. I think the thing that made the difference was maybe at one point as we left London, you know, we felt a little bit like our relationship felt like rocky, given all the sort of things we had stacked on us, that I think we thought music was the problem. We thought that it was like, oh, it's because we've got this financial insecurity, you know, there's oh God, it's just so hard. When will it pay off? You know, I think we thought that it was about that. But the more we really looked at our foundations, and like you've used that terminology, like the day to day, you know, instead of thinking so much ahead of, okay, when music starts, our relationship will get better and we'll have that sense of like anchoring, and we'll feel like the more we dug deep, which God, we could just talk so much about all the work we've done on the relationship and all the reading and the learning, but like we kind of really cemented our foundation. And I think it just brought that kind of stability back to the day to day and made us feel like we could tackle music in a very present moment way. Like a very, that's, to be honest, we got into mindfulness then as well. And it sort of is all very interconnected, really. And I think it gives you that belief that as long as you're turning up every day, it will happen.
Yeah, it sounds like you made the choice to what I'd refer to as live a rich life now, which means that a lot of times people live their life based on, well, at some point in the future when this circumstance happens, then I'll allow myself to live a life that lights me up rather than going through the motions. And that, does that circumstance come? Well, maybe, but probably not. We all know it's, when that happens, I'll do it. And at that moment, you know, when I've got more time on my hands, because there's always that moment in our life, isn't there, where we've got unlimited time forever. These things just don't happen, but you can choose to live your best creative life now, exercise now, do all of those things now. Sean, you reminded me of a really good quote. I think it was Seth Godin who said something along the lines of, like, instead of living your life for the weekend or for going on vacation, perhaps you should live a life that you don't want to escape from. It's something like that, you know, instead of, is that idea of, you know, if all you're living for is the weekend or when you go on holiday, maybe it's time to design a life that you don't want to escape from. You want to actually live all of the time. And that was certainly for us as well. I mean, I absolutely loved working in the city, and it was Anna who sat down with me and said, yeah, but this isn't your passion and your long term. Should we think about walking away from this? And that for me was great. I mean, the support that I felt to actually hear that was really good. And then it was on me sitting down going, oh, bloody hell, should we? But I think there's a moment as well where you weigh up the risks as well, because there are risks, but you're mitigating them. And one of the things that you guys did or was part of what you were doing was, okay, we're not going to live in this bonkers expensive city. Don't like that word expensive, but you know what I mean, comparatively to where you're going. You know, for us, it's more within our means to live the life that we want if we move up north than it is to live in London. And we did the same. It'd be more within our means to move out of the centre of London to pull this thing off. We could make sure we've got some money in the bank to tide us over, and all of those. There are certain things you can do to reduce the risks and sort of make the move. So I do have an interesting other question on this, because there is something quite curious that happens when all of a sudden the world is your oyster and you're no longer working in the city or finance or wherever else, and now you've got days and days and days to spend on your music. New pressures and things arrive. Sean, what was it like?
It felt like, to begin with, I was like, yes, this is fantastic. You know, you think you've got all the time in the world, basically. All of a sudden, you've just got all the time to be able to, you know, impart all these ideas that you had and things you wanted to do that you couldn't necessarily do when you were working. And can't remember how long it was going on for. It was that I was sort of in this sort of period of my life where I was really rich in time, but really unfocused was what was going on. Like this sort of all the time doesn't necessarily equate to being able to get the jobs done that you need to get done. You end up bringing in I ended up bringing in, at that particular time, without the right framework, bringing in far too many different things, projects, all these other things, thinking it was time that I needed to be able to accomplish the music goals and the goals. And as time went on and I realized that actually my output went down, after I'd quit KPMG, I realised that there was obviously, I was falling into a trap. I was falling into that time trap, and that's where it became really important to self-impose things like deadlines, and try to be able to create the environment that it was like at KPMG, the company I was working at the time, prior to leaving. How can I create this structure where I can really harness like ultra focus ultimately? Because if you don't do that, you run the risk of basically just, like I said, being better off actually in a working environment. Because once you get control of your time, it's actually, it comes, as you say, it comes with its own issues and complications. And the other part to that as well is like, the other thing that came up was this sense that I don't deserve all this time. And I'm looking at other producers, for example, in the FMM group, and they've got ridiculous jobs, working ridiculous hours like I was. And then you sort of start to think, this sounds really strange, but like, who am I to be able to, be this person who just sort of like produces music every day and stuff like this. And it's a really strange mindset that sort of creeps in, and I don't really know where it sort of comes from, but it thrusts you into this place where you sort of think, I have to produce amazing quality music in order to justify the fact that I am full-time now. It's like, this is like, I'm going to have to achieve, all these goals within half the time, quarter of the time. I'm going to have to, the music's going to have to go to the best labels now, because I've got all this time. And to be honest, it just doesn't work like that. I ended up getting consumed with it, to be quite honest, with that sort of thinking and mentality. So you don't have to have all this time to be able to achieve them goals, to be quite honest.
Yeah, so it's a lot of sort of self-imposed pressure that comes in. Yeah, totally. What was your experience of this, Amber, when Sean was going through all of this stuff? Because I think for people listening to the podcast, it's really interesting to always hear the perspectives of people who are in a relationship on the outside looking in, and from your perspective, the first thing that you're seeing without any conversations going on is, okay, left the job, output's gone down, output was supposed to go up, that was the deal. How did you react to that? What was sort of the journey like for you?
It's so funny, like, just listening to Sean back there, you forget, like, obviously being the partner in this situation, like how many different, and this is mutual, by the way, because I obviously do a creative career as well, but like how many different like personality changes we've like kind of seen in each other. And I think hearing you talk about that, I can remember it so well. But it's like, the challenge is, you could turn sitting in this bedroom every day, you either have the idea, mentality, this is my studio, or you do that kind of really persecuting mentality where it's like, I just sit here and DOS all day, you know what I mean? I've not got structure, I'm a chancer, you know what I mean? Sat with all this spare time, what have I got to show for it? And I've seen that change in you. I think Sean, particularly coming from a very relatively academic background, and being used to always revising so hard, working for all his qualifications at KPMG and stuff, it was kind of letting go of this idea of, well, if I just put all this time, and it's like what you were describing earlier, is that I felt like that was quite a shock to the system at first, and knowing it's not going to work the same. It is about understanding the kind of efficiency and turning up and how to do it actually meaningfully. And I think for both of us, it's so interesting because when you love someone so much, you're always seeing like the best sides of them, and you're always seeing, it's always like trying to handle the critical voice, and we do it for each other all the time. It was only yesterday you were doing it for me when I was ready to pack it in. I'd hit an overwhelm with this project I'm doing right now. I was like, I just want to leave them to it. I can't be arsed anymore. But with both of us, the inner voice is a bit different. I think yours maybe at times has been slightly veering a bit maybe in that perfectionist mode, like sort of it'll only be ready when it's perfect. And for me, it's interesting. I have imposter syndrome because I'm kind of doing it at the moment. You know, I have got a career out of this and stuff, and it's that voice creeps up where it's like, I'm a blagger. I'm going to get worked out any time now. They're going to work me out and they're going to be like, you know, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to get someone else in because you don't actually know what you're on about. So when I said earlier about the getting the foundation right between the two of us, because most days all we have to rely on is each other. Obviously, we work together. So I feel like the more we nailed our like communication styles and, you know, that kind of like really being that support for each other, the better it got, because we all know, like in these industries, it's the biggest hurdle is getting over yourself a lot of the time. It's getting out your own way. So I think that's the journey from when we left London and did all that. It was learning to get out of our own way and seeing ourselves as professionals, even if we weren't going to an office, starting to act like we were the real deal, you know, that even if it's getting ready in the morning and doing something, or you know, making sure you do a commute to work, if to walk outside or something, you know, it's kind of doing those things that'll get you into that mindset that, yeah, we're doing it now kind of thing.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, well, I'm going to quickly segue off to the walking to work bit, 'cause that's what I did when I left the office as well. I got up at the same time and I walked almost the route to work and then doubled back and came back and started to work in the flat at the time. But it's really interesting you should say that, because just to sort of put a little bit of context into this, you know, the self-doubt, imposter syndrome, you've worked on some really cool documentaries. I mean, we're not talking about you not actually doing stuff and getting anywhere. You're actually doing really well. I mean, you know, some of the things that you've been working on sound a bit scary, actually. Some of them that Sean was telling me about, I was like, bloody hell, I wouldn't do that, like drugs, gangs and whatever. Bloody hell, you're brave. But you actually, you know, you're doing really well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny, like reflecting on stuff, and it's so comparable to like what you guys do with music and we do with music and stuff, where it's that imposter syndrome now. I try to become more comfortable with it, because any job I had, when I first got that job in London, for example, I was just a trainee before that, and there was this program on at the BBC. I'd always see like young reporters on there, and I thought, do you know what, that is the place I want to work. I'd watch on TV and I thought, this is a place where they let, you could call it young, you could call it inexperienced, whatever it is, people own their own ideas. And I learned so much there. But when I was there the whole time, I was the youngest in the team, and I was like, any second now, any minute now is going to be that meeting where they're like, can we just have a word afterwards? And they're going to be like, sorry, you need to move back to Manchester now. But now, because I'm doing a BBC Three series now, and it's like that had always been something which I'd heralded as like, that is the dream. And I don't really like classifying things as the dream, but it always felt like that when I was younger. And now, yes, I am doing it. And I pitched the story, and then, you know, didn't know anybody who got me the job, no situation like that, as kind of organic as it could come. And it's still there, that imposter syndrome of, yeah, I might be good at talking to the gang member, and I might be good at, you know, finding this story, but oh, am I professional enough? Like, am I disciplined enough? You know, there's always just that thing that niggles away, but I'm trying to get better at seeing the imposter syndrome as just like, no, it means I'm in the right place, because it's actually like it's a place of growth, you know what I mean? Whatever I'm deeming as I'm not ready for it is actually a good place to be. And It is all very, we mutually learn a lot about each other as we're going along in all of this. And it's this, funnily enough, like Sean always quotes me something you say from FMM, which, sorry, it's going to literally gone from my mind now, but it's like, what is it, like, who you want to be is who you are. What, God, you'll know it.
Well, the master's in front of us, but
you're going to have to give me a bit more than that to dial this one.
Sorry, I'm on the spot now.
You really butchered that one on me, Amber.
What we do every day is how we live our life.
Yes, that's it.
Right. Yes, yeah, that is a really good quote. Yeah, totally. And it's really interesting you talking about the fact that learning to lean into discomfort, because if we're comfortable, it just means that we're doing the familiar all the time, and if we're doing the familiar, we can't possibly be growing and learning, because it's the same as we've always done. And that then we will go into the quote that I use all the time: if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. There's anything that means that we want to level up considerably means stepping into the unknown. It's guaranteed, and we're wired to try to go for safety. So it's the old brain's going to kick something out, whether it's telling you I'm going to be judged, I shouldn't be here. It's going to try and do something to keep you back in your box, basically. So the fact that you're aware of that is amazing. And I think the lesson of, you know, even though now I've jumped up to that, and now I've thought to myself, when I've got the documentary on BBC Three, then I've made it, then I'll be confident. No, now I found another reason to second guess and to doubt myself. It's such a powerful lesson.
Oh, most definitely, because it could be even comparable to you get your tier 1 release, or you get your first gig somewhere at a festival, and then you're like, this is it, I'm gonna feel accomplished. But it's like your mind will try to do those tricks on you, where it's like nobody's gonna turn up, the crowd are gonna stop dancing, you're gonna show yourself up, whatever it will be. It's always kind of there, but I think it's the perspective shift, really.
Yeah,
I think.
Totally.
And I think it's a constant thing to work on. And I think, like Amber said, the mindfulness stuff and meditation, particularly for me, has been a massive thing. It allows me to be able to see what's going on in my mind. And like you always say, we can't solve what we can't see. And so that is a massive thing, like mindfulness and meditation. We speak to each other about this stuff every day, all day as well. Like sometimes it's obviously a bit too much as we sort of overanalyze each other and whatever. But yeah, but it helps massively to be able to speak to each other about these things, because we are going through the same things. And I think like what Amber brings to, you know, who she is and her personality, she really compliments me. Like she mentioned in the past, like she comes from a place of throwing herself into the mix and just seeing whether, you know, she sinks or swims. And I come from it from the completely other end, where I'm like, right, unless I'm bulletproof, I'm not going in. And so so she's pulled me into towards the water, and I've basically given her a situation where, you know, giving her a little bit of a floating raft or something, I guess, to use a bit of analogy, where I'm like, okay, well, you've got this imposter syndrome that's going on in your mind. Can we use like evidence to basically quash your fears? So a lot of the stuff that Amber's been going through over the last, 2 years, whatever it's been, has been telling herself stories about how people are, judging her, about how she isn't good enough and all this sort of stuff. And then we've been getting to a point where it's like, okay, well, what's the evidence? What does the evidence suggest? Well, it suggests that, otherwise it suggests the complete opposite. And so it's been really great for us, because this is something we've learned from you, from FMM, and we're able to impart it into what Amber does, but not just that, it's into our life as a whole as well.
Yeah, we use the exercises that Sean is, taking from FMM weekly, monthly, whenever it is, and I use them all the time because they're so applicable to every area of your life.
Yeah, totally. I hear that a lot, and it really, massively lights me up, because it was never the intention when we first started FMM like 6 years ago. It was always, all about creativity and getting people to break through the creative hurdles and be able to write the music that they dream of being able to write, and all of those things. What I hadn't foreseen was these sort of stories where it's like, I've taken that and I've put that somewhere else and it's changed this. And it's in hindsight, it seems kind of obvious, because a lot of these things have come from the other areas of my life that I've bought into it. And then the more I've realized, it's about the totality of who we are. If any plate drops, just like you guys were talking about with your relationship, if any one plate in our life drops, the rest of them will come crashing down. So we've got to take care of everything, of which creativity and, your musical output and your journalism and all those things are an important part of that. So obviously now things are a lot different. You know, Sean, I know your journey really well, and you know you're busting through all the perfectionism and all of those things and continually growing. And it's, I mean, my God, your music has developed exponentially over the last few years now. And you know, you're getting like interest and releases on labels, and we'll talk about the DJ gigs and things that are coming up as well. You were talking about the tools in FMM. Is there anything else that's been like the difference that's made the difference from FMM and working together? Because I love hearing these stories.
I think obviously the biggest, the absolute standout biggest thing is the community aspect, which FMM brings. And there are some, you know, there are a lot of these sorts of groups, or there are a lot of online music resources out there which give some really great, you know, insights into how to produce music or certain technicals and stuff like this. But the difference within, for me anyway, the difference within FMM is the community. Like, the community is absolutely buzzing. Like, there's high energy. Everybody is in it to help other people as well. That's an ethos that you and the team really try to bring out in people. And I've met quite a lot of people within the community. I've met a lot of people, but in particular, some people who I've met in the community have been absolutely, you know, an incredible part of almost like, you know, an absolute part of basically what it's taken for us to get to where we're getting to in terms of our releases and stuff like this. Because some of the things that some of the people have said to us, you know, whether it's to do with belief and going all in and things like that, have just been like the difference that's made the difference. They've made me think differently, and that's from being able to get feedback from people, like from actual human beings, and being able to communicate with people and share ideas and everything. And you know, I remember a particular point last year where myself and Mark Allen, who's obviously been on the show, and Vegard, we were sat on a Zoom meeting having a conversation about our goals. And I can't remember exactly how it got onto the subject, but I was basically saying to them, you know, I wish ultimately my music was as good as yours. In fact, if it was, I'd be sending it out to these big labels. And they basically just turned around and said, well, why? What do you think that we think about your music? And they basically made me think, wow, like, you know, that sort of a question just opened my mind so massively. And then they were like, obviously, we love your music. We think it's, you know, we think it's really up there. And you're getting this insight from people who are releasing on top labels, and that level of belief allowed me to, rather than err on the side of caution, because it's really this human thing, or for me in particular, it's this sense that I'm going to err on the side of caution. I'm just going to, you know, take it steady and whatever. But that conversation allowed me to err on the side of what I call uncertainty. So err on the side of it is uncertain, but I'm going to go with the positive aspect rather than the negative. I'm going to go with the going for it rather than the waiting. And that wouldn't have happened had, obviously, you know, there not been that sort of community and that sort of support. And because of that, I ended up sending some music out, you know, to one of my tier 1 labels last year. They accepted it. It's coming out this year. And like I said, if that hadn't have been there, that would not have happened. That would not have happened.
Be one of the world's best kept secrets.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, along with everybody else.
We'll be going on in that room, but none of us would have any access to it.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's so funny as well, because I think, like, when you do this whole freelance and go it alone thing, like, I think there's this belief that it's like, right, you need to just lock yourself away in a room on your own and just like literally like gram it all into your head. But like, we are relational beings, and there's so much to be said for having people to bounce off, and it gets you out of your own mind as well. Like, even not that long ago, a few weeks, well, a bit longer than that, maybe a couple of months ago, like, we were toying with the idea of whether to go for it to a gig in order to network. And I was kind of, I don't know why, maybe I was just on one of those days where I was a bit skeptical, where I was like, I mean, the chances of us getting to meet this guy are probably like so slim, you know what I mean? This venue we'd never been to, can we actually be bothered? And it was, you posted about it in FMM, didn't you? And people were like, you will find a way. Because it was like, because I couldn't see the path, I was a bit like, I was just going to waste a load of money, petrol. I'm going to end up drinking more than I want. You know, you're looking for all the kind of like hurdles and the problems. But that reassurance from somebody who's outside of your little bubble, that it's like, you will find a way. Like, and we did find a way, but it is, yeah, that little boosters every now and then, they just make such a difference. And it's, again, like I said earlier, they make you feel the real deal, because you feel like you're a part of a company. Company is not quite the right word, it's so much more than that, but you're a part of a community, and then you are an artist because you're part of an artist community.
Totally. And so, I mean, this getting out there is fascinating, because so many things have come as a result of that. As I know, we've talked about, well, we've gone out, started making contacts, and the contact that we're talking about is one of the biggest DJs in the world. You've started sending your music out, you've got signed on a top label, and now you've got like DJ gigs coming up again as a result of just getting out there and having the conversations. And so it's interesting that, you know, you just don't know what's going to turn you on, what's going to flick the switch. It's that, what, like you said, Sean, you had one phrase, you got asked one question that just flicks your world upside down. And the great thing is that because you're both creatives, I've no doubt that, Amber, you hear things in your work and you bring that back as well, the things that are going to move you guys forward. So talking about moving forward, obviously we've talked about the idea of this project that you guys have got, and I know that you're big into sort of goal setting and visualizing the future. What is the plan going forward? What are the next steps, and where do you see yourselves really going with this?
I think the overall aim for us is to combine the music and the documentary storytelling, like we said at the beginning, and do something perhaps akin to, I don't know if you've seen this, Keith, or anybody that's listening, but there's a show on Netflix that Anthony Bourdain does. And for those those not familiar with him, he's like a chef, a celebrity chef, and he basically travels the world, and he goes to, it's called Parts Unknown, and he goes to places that typically people might not know about, or at least it started like that, or he might go to a place that people do know about, but it'll uncover something that they don't know about. And you go through politics, socioeconomics, all these sorts of things. Like, you know, it's really what's actually the big, most important things that are going on, like within that country, within these communities. And the medium in which he sits down with people is through food. He's a chef, you know, he cooks, or people cook to him and, you know, for him and stuff like this. And he's met some incredible people like Barack Obama, like in Vietnam, and all sorts of incredible things that have been going on. And he's basically, I mean, the series is just incredible, but we want to create something similar where we use music as our tool to be able to open into communities and countries and situations. You know, for example, we were going to do a documentary in Uganda a couple of years back, and we went and flew into Uganda. We got put on at a festival, which was a startup festival by one of our friends, and he's also part of, like, he also owns like a charity out there. And he said, you know, there's a lot of journalism, there's a lot of stuff going on in Uganda, which would be really interesting to you, and it could be a massive help. And so Amber obviously was like, yes, this is incredible. There's so much to sort of go on within, you know, somewhere like Uganda. And so we flew out there, having got a commission for the documentary, played the festival, and at the same time we were going around speaking to people. There was a big political situation going on that time.
And music is political. This is the thing, like, you know, without getting too controversial, I don't mean in a controversial way. It's just like, as you were describing, like Bourdain uses food because it's a very universal thing. No matter where you go in the world, people love food, and it's the same with music. And I think we want to use the way it brought us together. And, you know, everyone knows the amazing people you meet on the dance floor and how just literally it's the most unifying thing. And that will translate wherever you are in the world. And I think we kind of like coined this phrase, like the world behind the decks. It's like all these DJs go to the most incredible, like you look at like Warong in Brazil and you're like, God, it's in the middle of this insane like rainforest in the middle of Brazil. And it's like, but what's going on in those communities there? And it's like, we would love the idea to create, you know, a life and something with that purpose for ourselves where we go and play shows, but then we spend a bit of meaningful time there for a few days and we meet and we try to use our platform to help. You know, music is escapism. Everybody wants that. And I think there's a real big push as well in the way we're looking at like how audiences are moving a lot more towards like that kind of festivals and daytime festivals and, you know, BPM and all these kind of like festivals that are being created in like sort of paradise locations. It's not just about a kind of, I guess, a 3 a.m. set in a warehouse somewhere. Like people are quite interested in exploring the world, both either through social media or physically being there. And that kind of landscape is where we're very interested in, because I think there's so much kind of interesting overlap.
So do you sort of envisage yourself as kind of like digital nomads, basically constantly on the move, or once or twice you might go somewhere? What would you put it like at the moment for you?
I think obviously the underlying mechanics of exactly how this will work are yet to be determined, but we're backing ourselves that it'll work somehow.
But we are
I think
people,
we are definitely. We'd love to be able to just travel from place to place to place to place. If you know, having a home base and whatever. But I think we'd be quite happy to just keep roaming around. To be quite honest,
you can keep smashing out the tracks with just your laptop as well. That's the beauty of it these days.
Well, that's the thing as well. Like, you know, that creates a really good limitation. You know, I'm not going to take a load of hardware to all these different countries and start setting up a studio, you know, here, there, and everywhere. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, that gives me this sort of limitation where I'm like, right, well, I'm going to have to work in the box, and so I'm going to have to be able, you know, therefore I'm not going to use any hardware. I'm going to use only the tools that are going to put us in the best possible place to be able to do this job. So yeah, I think
that's been a big lesson, actually, hasn't it, in limiting the options. I think that's been quite a powerful thing we both realised. But yeah, like I think with electronic music, there are so many developing scenes. Like we were just talking a month ago with Mo Black, this guy who does the Afro House scene, and I was asking him, like, why is India not going off? Obviously, I'm South Asian myself, and I was like, bloody hell, I mean, there's such a big market in India. Like, where are all these huge DJs? Obviously, they do have a scene, but not necessarily like DJs from their way making it into like the Western market. And I'm like, these are the places we want to be. It's kind of like the unusual sort of scenes I think we're very, very intrigued by. So, yeah.
Exciting stuff. I love it. So before we look at what's coming up in the immediate future, I always have a question that I close these out with. And you two have been on, you know, I love this because you've been on your own unique journeys in different creative worlds and in a relationship and seeing each other's unique journeys. So this would be really interesting to hear what you both come up with this, which is the time machine question. If you could go back to the beginning of this kind of journey, so like, you know, maybe Sean, perhaps the good one is when you left London. You know, I think for both of you it sounds like a pivotal moment. And like Amber, you've presumably, had you finished your apprenticeship then and you were kind of coming out into the big, right, okay, and Sean, you've left your job. So maybe that moment, if you could jump back to there and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be? Oh, look at their faces. Yeah. Oh, what's the one piece going to be?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Obviously, there is so much, and so it is difficult to boil it down. But I think it's having a framework to be able to operate in has been probably the most important thing overall for me. And like I touched on earlier on, and like you've said there, Keith, you know, coming out of a professional structure into no structure ultimately feels freeing and incredible. And sometimes, you know, that escapism just you're like, wow, amazing. But you need a framework and you need structure, especially if you really want to make it. And I'm not saying that we've necessarily made it or anything like that, but our days feel a lot more professional now than what they used to in the past because of the framework. And we've had to build that framework. We've had to build in these self-imposed deadlines and things like this in order for us to be able to, keep the output going and keep things moving forward. Because without a framework and without an understanding of even whether things are, to some extent, how do you even know things are moving forward? What are your goals? What are your milestones and stuff like this? Like how do you reflect on your how can you reflect on your progress?
Yeah, like benchmarks, milestones, all of those different things.
Yeah.
I would say mine's a bit of a buzzword, but mine was, I'd say, authenticity and just learning to be comfortable with that inner voice and who I was. Like in my industry, and it's probably like similar with music, like I started to understand that ideas were your currency and, kind of owning that and being happy with that. When I first moved to London in that newsroom at BBC and surrounded by Brexit was going on and all this political situation. And I used to think like, I need to, and I don't even sound that mank, right? I'm not actually that mank, but I was like, God, I need to like have a news voice. I need to like act different. I can't be like, got a bit of a crude, sarcastic sense of humour. I was like, I need to act like a woman, you know what I mean? And the more I've just become comfortable with just being who I am, and I think it's so the same with music. Like we've had this crossroads on occasion where we're like, what genre do we need to fit in? Does it need to sound a bit more like this? Should we add this little gimmicky thing that people love? Because, then blah, blah, blah might like it. And I think when you just become more comfortable with, literally just being happy with whatever that inner creativity and inner voice wants to be, it will kind of pay off. But yeah, that's been a big thing for me, I would say.
Yeah, totally. So this idea of being true to yourself and then finding a home for your music or finding a home for your journalism rather than trying to force yourself, mold yourself again to what you believe other people want you to be, not what they actually want, but in your perception of what it might be. So you're erroneously forcing yourself to be like something you don't even know if people really want, which is a curious thing that we get ourselves kind of caught up into. But great takeaways. I absolutely love that. So what can we expect coming up? Tell us about it. We've got this release and other things going on. Give us an insight. Where can people get your music?
We have, yeah. So we've got a release coming out with Ocean Verde on their label. Sorry, on Ocean Verde's label, Ampersand. It was due to come out on the 22nd of April, but we've reshuffled it around. It's going to come out in June or July now, so that the impact is bigger and better. It suits us. It suits them. So yeah, a couple of months we're going to have an EP out with them guys, which we're absolutely buzzing about. That was like one of our big things for last year. Get some out with them guys. We love them, love their music, and they feel like a really nice home for us. We've actually going to have a gig supporting them as well at some point in the next few months. So not sure exactly where it will be, whether it's going to be between Manchester or Leeds or London. But again, it's our second or third gig or something like that together. So we're absolutely, buzzing for it. And you in terms of documentaries, you've got obviously the BBC Three stuff coming out at
wait here. I mean, there could be some like legal challenges to what we're doing. God knows what's on.
It's so exciting, the stuff you're getting yourself mixed up in.
It's so funny. I mean, honestly, we've got the journey we've been on together is a laugh. At times it feels like you live in a movie. Like Sean will hear me on the phone to like gang members or someone just in like the other room, or I've just come back from a shooting. Oh, you won't believe what happened. But it is all part of the journey. But yeah, that's called Hometown. So it's literally based in my hometown of Manchester, about sort of it's like a bit true crime meets current affairs-y type vibe. So we're just editing that at the moment. So yeah, watch this space. I'm not sure.
Hopefully there's no red tape or anything that gets in the way of it. I can't believe it with the DJ gig as well. It sounds like you're going to play this when I'm just out of the country by the sounds of things, so I won't be able to come and check you guys out playing. So you're gonna have to keep ramping this up and get yourselves out to Austin.
We'll come play in Austin one time. That's also all right.
or Brazil. You mentioned Burundi.
Or Brazil. Yeah,
can help you guys with that when you're ready as well. So we'll talk about that. I've got some good contacts out there for you. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for not only just coming on the show, but being really candid and talking about, relationships and work and pressure and the, imposter syndrome and all of these things. It's they're very personal things, and to have the courage to share those things and the impact that's going to have for people listening, can't be understated. So a huge thank you. And we were going to have to cycle back round, because you guys are kind of both ramping up in your individual careers and the joint project. When that starts motoring even more and you start traveling the world, you're going to have more stories than anybody else on the podcast. So I hope you'll come back and do another session with me in the future.
Anytime, absolutely. Yeah, would love to, definitely.
Awesome. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.